A lot of Canadian real estate investors are sick and tired of investing in Canada due to a lot of the landlord-tenant laws that are really not so landlord-friendly, and still a lot of people are looking at US real estate investing, particularly in the multifamily sector. So today we have a very special guest, Grant Warrington, who's going to be sharing his insights into US multifamily real estate. So Grant, great to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me. I've been looking forward to this one. Because when I bought my first apartment building, there was no one out there being realistic and telling me about small apartment buildings. Like what kind of flooring do you put in? You know, you're going to watch a lot of videos and people are going to say, you need to rip out all the cabinets. You need to put dishwashers in. You need to put washers and dryers in the units. Do you know how much money that costs? It's like 50 grand. That's what the people on the internet forget. The money has to come from somewhere. When I own the building, it comes from my pocket, and there's only so much of it. So I'm not putting in dishwashers. I'm not ripping out cabinets. That's that kind of shit that we came across. And I'm like, well, I'll just make videos on this and I'll put the actual numbers and the truth. Like, you know, it costs us 10 grand to rehab an apartment. That's with us, managing everything. So that's where that all came from,
Quickly talking about your first deal, like how did you get in? When was that? And how did that go for you?
Couple of questions we need to clarify. First deal was back in 2003. So that was how I first got into real estate. And I was in and out quickly, declared bankruptcy, bought three single family homes. Everybody owed me money. I thought I was going to be really nice to everybody and give them breaks on the rent at Christmas and everything. We never made it to Christmas. It was disaster. I didn't know what I was doing. I had no education and I drank back then. A bad drinking problem at that time, quit drinking in 2011, re-educated myself, bought our first single family then in December 2015, re-educated with my wife now. And then there's our first apartment building in January 2019. So I have a lot of different firsts. When I did start on my own in 2000, and had to declare bankruptcy and go through all that. It was all my own money. I gave everything back to the bank. Everything was in great condition. It was a learning experience. I don't blame anyone. I just didn't know how to do anything, really. I was just jumping in because I had the money. They were giving out mortgages, back then. So, they just gave me mortgages, as many mortgages as I wanted. It got bad. But like when I had to declare bankruptcy, I was breaking out. My skin, I was like, what is going on? It was stress. It was killing me. Declaring bankruptcy helped because it got me out of that situation. But I learned, and I always thought, I'm like, do I want to share these kind of things on podcasts that I had to quit? I quit drinking with the help of God. I had to declare bankruptcy. I sound like such a loser. That's my story, man. I'm like, you know what? That's just what happened to me. People can think whatever they want or take whatever they want from it, but that's the truth. And that's what happened to me. I wasn't educated. I wasn't in the right frame of mind. And that's my story. So, that's why I share it.
Interesting when people encounter these kind of hurdles. What was it? There was a story I heard from somebody else. They were telling me that there were two people who came from there were two brothers, came from the same family, and one of them was grossly successful, in the sense that he had a family, he had a business, he had money, he had a house, he was whatever, very well established. And then the other was problematic. He had a drug problem, failed relationships, just wasn't doing too well. And then they were both interviewed and they asked them both the same question. And they say, what is the reason why you're like this? And then they both gave the same answers: because my father was X. And because of this, I am now doing this. Different adversities, different challenges, people receive them in different ways. People can create their own paths. And I think adversity is one of those things that can really, you decide. I feel like a lot of people can have a lot of influence as to how they let that direct or influence their life, right? So you're obviously, even the words you're using, re-educating, right? You're obviously on a journey in life of educating yourself and growing. And that doesn't seem to stop at any point. You're educating yourself by going to different groups, organizations, and that is a skill. Learning is a skill.
I could have been a victim. I could be out there telling people, don't buy a rental property. I lost money. You're going to lose money. It's a scam. Don't do it, right? But even then, I knew like, I'm going to do it again. I know I'll buy more property in the future, but I didn't take that victim mentality. I still don't today. It was all my fault. It was no one else's. I never pointed the finger at anyone else. These people screwed me. I screwed myself. And I think that's the one thing. The other thing with drinking, I tell people, like, you can quit drinking. If you're an asshole and you quit drinking and you don't improve yourself, you're a sober asshole. And that's what people don't realize. You know what I mean? Like, no matter what, you need to improve yourself and you need to not blame. Because I could tell you exactly why I started drinking when I did so young, right? What does that matter, right? Like, you can't point point fingers and blame and do whatever. It's just like, that's my story, but how do I get through this? There is no issue with drinking or anything like that. Thank God, because I did quit with the help of God. It's just interesting. That's my growth journey too, is I can look back and go, wow, the reason I did that was because I wasn't loved the way I wanted to be loved when I was young. And that's nobody's fault. My parents are fantastic parents, but they probably weren't loved the way they needed to be loved either. And the same with their parent. And you know what? And that's probably the same with people listening that have kids. You might not be loving them the way they need to be because you don't know exactly what that is. That's the one thing I've loved about this journey as well, is the personal growth. Yeah, real estate investing is awesome, but my personal growth journey has been tremendous.
Well, it takes the personal growth journey to propel the endeavor. Right? Everybody has a fuel source, right? And that fuel source can either be, you can either light it and it can propel you, or you light it and it just burns you up, right?
Yeah.
Then it depends how you want to leverage that fuel, because these are motivating factors, right? And while you have had a lot of success through what you're doing and through multifamily like real estate investing, it seems to not be what it is that is the end all be all. It's more like the byproduct of what you're doing, because probably you could use these experiences to do anything. The real estate is just a vessel.
Not a lot of people are willing to share their failure, and then I feel like, especially in today's world, especially there's a lot of online coaches out there, people who are trying to like figure themselves out, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think your type of approach and your type of story literally will draw people in, because we love sharing a lot of our failures, the flips that didn't work out for us, why acquisition we didn't have the money lined up and then we end up losing the deposit. We share about those type of stories all the time, simply because this is how people can actually learn.
Yes.
Right? Not through all the beautiful story, right? Like everyone talk about the wins and try to neglect or try to hide all the losses just so they can sell their programs more significantly. But yeah, no, I think this approach is going to be what we need to take literally in the near future, right? Just because everybody's doing the exact same thing. So taking an opposite approach, I think, will give us a better result. How did you switch from single family all the way into multifamily? Because like 2013, you got out of that situation again, started acquiring single family home. What changed in terms of perspective on how you want to start really scaling up into the apartment building?
What happened was, I had a W-2 job. I was a construction worker. And at that point, I was actually working for the union, my union, the operating engineers. So, I mean, you couldn't get a better position where I was at. I wasn't running equipment, cranes anymore. I was working for the union as a business agent type role. And we had 11 units. We got up to 11 units in 2 years, which is pretty quick because we did it with really no money. My wife and I, we were broke the whole time, because I don't care what people say. If you have debt on your properties, when you really do the math correctly, and you account for property management and all these different things in there, and you really do the math, you're probably making around $200 a month on your properties per unit. And people say, I make $900. I'm like, man, if you have debt on that, I don't know. I'd love to look at those numbers and see what they really break. My wife's like, listen, we're going to need 50 single family houses to make $10,000 a month in cash flow. And I was like, oh my gosh, I can't do that. Like, we had 11 and I'm killing myself. There's no way we can do that again. So I'm like, the dream is gone. It like broke me. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I couldn't believe it. And then we brainstormed and we're like, you know what? We need to stop buying single family rentals. We need to start buying small apartment buildings. That was it. And we kind of started looking at that. And we're like, yeah, that's going to be the answer, because now instead of buying 39 more single family homes, now think about that, 39 more purchases, I have to find, rehab, put tenants in place, and refinance 39 of them. I have to find them all over Southeast Michigan somewhere. We could buy one apartment building. That sounds a lot more doable, right? So that's how it happened. It didn't fall on our lap, but it just, I can get into that and what we did. I mean, I'll break down all the numbers for you guys, how we found it and everything, but that's why we shifted to apartments.
Right. That the difference between getting to some of those bigger numbers is really starting to think about where it is that you want to be, and then looking at what you're doing now and see, is that really going to get you there? Because if you don't start thinking about the bigger things, you're not going to be able to hit those bigger numbers. We look at this when it came to house flipping too, because if we want to flip houses and we want to make, and this is also why Ryan, I think, switched his model a little bit too, is that if we wanted to make like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million a year, how many of these houses do we have to flip? And that's a lot of moving parts, right? So you have these big operations, and each one respectively is not going to be doing as well as you would hope unless maybe you start flipping bigger properties or you start investing in bigger projects, right? So you can definitely have bigger engines with less moving parts. And I think that's also why a lot of people are interested, because multifamily in the States is actually very interesting. You know, we have a large Canadian audience and there's a lot of people in Canada, but because of how some things aren't as ideal as we would want them to be, and we feel like the government doesn't always facilitate entrepreneurship and facilitate maybe certain business endeavors. The States has a lot of infrastructure for this when it comes to finances, borrowing, even lenders for value add improvements to your properties. And there's just a lot more moving parts that you can leverage and work. So Canadians are pulling money and buying properties in the States. They're buying apartment buildings. They're finding projects to invest, value add, whatever it is. What do you think right now is the best entry point for people looking to get in?
The people I really talk to are the people that already own like one or two single family homes or whatever. Those are the people that I try. You know, I have the apartment buying blueprint, my course. I teach them how to get into small apartments because a lot of people are like, I don't know how to do it. I don't know if I could ever do it.
What do you consider a small apartment? Sorry.
5 units.
5 units.
So you could, so 5 units and up. If for someone listening to this, just starting out, buy anything, buy a single family home, buy anything you can just to get in the game and get going, because you have to start. So I started with single family rentals. We moved out of that space, but it got me to where we're at today. You know, we're financially free today. We just moved to St. Petersburg, Florida from Detroit, my wife and I. Incredible. I never thought that, you know, buying that one single family rental is going to allow us both to quit our jobs and to relocate to a better, a better place to live. It's incredible, but you got to start somewhere. It doesn't happen overnight. And if you have the option to start a little higher, then start with more units and start with 5 units and above.
What was the biggest challenge when you first got into this multifamily space? Was it the financing? Was it the operational side? Like what was the biggest takeaway from that experience?
Well, definitely not operations. We'd already self-managed. By the time I was buying it, I had already quit my job and took a job as the director of operations of a property management company in my area. It was like my mentor. I took the job. So I managed like 800 units at that point. I managed, I think it was 14 apartment buildings. The biggest one was 155 units. That wasn't it at all. It was money, I would say. Where to find the money for the building. That was the biggest issue.
Did you talk about that in your course? Like how did you find the money or deal? Like how do you put everything together?
What we did, some different things. We would buy single family rental homes, right? And then we would refinance them all in a commercial loan. We'd get a blanket loan and we'd get a bunch of money back and we'd go out and buy 3 more properties. And then basically when we said we're done, we're buying multifamily from now on, we took that money, I think it was $125,000, and we just put that as a down payment. So great, it's a down payment, but the property was a 20-unit building and it was a mess. So now we needed more money. So we took $50,000 in a private loan from one of our investors, personal loan, from them. And then we had $58,000 in a home equity line of credit. We took that out. And so now we have $108,000. So that's what we did. And then we would rehab out of cash flow as well. We weren't taking cash flow ourselves. We were just putting everything back into that property to get it up and running. We bought it. It was seller financing. So we bought it for $625,000. We put $125,000 down. It appraised 16 months later for $1,030,000, and we refinanced it and we took a loan out for $800,000 and we got a check for $300,000. All our money's out of the deal now at this point, which is fantastic. We took that money and we went forward and we bought an 11-unit building with that. But we found that off market. The 20-unit we found off market. We found the 11-unit off market. Yeah, that's how we found the majority of our buildings.
When you say it like that, it sounds like a pretty simple approach. You just do these. You do these things. You're doing these one step at a time, though. You're not like buying them all together. You're finishing one, moving on to the other, pulling money, doing the next one, right?
Yes.
You mentioned something about blanket mortgages. You said that you were doing that with a single family home. What is the minimum amount that you need, or is it a value?
It would depend. Normally credit unions are best to deal with, or a commercial mortgage broker. That's who we use, because he deals with credit unions and he can get us better terms. But they wanted to see, I believe it was a minimum of like 3 properties. It has to be attractive to them. It's got to be a big enough loan. And then, they would give us a commercial loan on it or a blanket loan. They'd package all 3 of those houses into one loan. And then we walked away with a check. And we did that a couple of times, and that's how we were able to grow.
And then when you pivot from there into a multi-res property, do the financing terms change significantly that with giving you different challenges, whether it's higher interest rates, bigger down payments?
Pretty much similar to that commercial loan that we got, the blanket loan, having the same conversation, speaking the same language. We got seller financing on the first one. So when we refinanced out, probably got a little bit lower interest rate, and we got a 5-year balloon payment. And then after that, it would float for 5 years, the interest rate. So it's a 10-year balloon. 5-year fixed, 10-year balloon, and a 25-year AM on that. So we got really good terms on that, we felt.
Does the threshold or the stress tolerance affect you much when you're doing this? And you do this obviously all through a corporation, right? Is there any issue with financial stress tolerance when qualifying for building after building? Either rents are too low or valuations don't work out. Is there any challenges there that you come up with?
In the lender's eyes that like trying to get the loan, or?
I think there's 2 facets that I think people want to know about. Largely it comes to the acquisition process, because we might find a building and say this building looks great on paper. Okay, how do we get a lender to get on board with us? And then there's the capital requirement, which is a little bit more that we can talk about after, which is raising capital from talking to investors and that type of thing. But let's just say somebody is pivoting, playing Monopoly. We have the green properties. They're selling their portfolio. They're going to come across some capital.
What we did was we sold, we would sell some of our properties. Some we looked at our portfolio and thought, what do we want? If we had to hold something for 10 years, what would it be? And we looked at a couple of them. We're like, we do not want to hold these for 10 years. So we sold those, and that would give us more income. But my wife and I own these outright. We don't have any partners in them. So it's just her and I. The issue's always they're underperforming. The rents are very low. The properties all need to be rehabbed. We ran into all of that. Luckily, with the first one, it was seller financing, so we didn't have an issue there. And then when we refinanced, we just showed the bank what we did. Here's what it was when we bought it, and here's what it is. But as we went along, then the last building we bought, an 8-unit building, it was underperforming. We did a 1031 into it though. We were putting a lot of money down. So the bank didn't have a big problem with that because we had a track record. We told them, here's what we've done. Here's what we've taken buildings from. Here's what we brought them to. Also, this building, the rents are at 700 in average rents were 719 in 2 months. We're going to increase average rents to 850. So, when we put that on paper and laid that out, the bank didn't have any problem lending on that. But, like Mike Tyson says, right? Everybody has a plan till you get punched in the mouth. We had vandalism on that property. We had all kinds of stuff go wrong on that property. We still did what we said we were going to do on paper, but that was definitely our most stressful property. The vandalism and just all that kind of shit, unfortunately.
Yeah. Due to the location, like the crime rate and all that stuff, did you feel like you made a mistake on the selecting the location, or? The
problem you're going to get into, and this is what people don't realize, is when anytime anyone tells you, I have long-term tenants here, you're looking to buy a building, you're buying it off market, and the owner says, this place is great. I have a long-term tenants here. They've been here for 20 years. Chances are, and majority of the time, they probably shouldn't be there. They wouldn't qualify for you. Right? If you screened them, they probably shouldn't be living in that building. And the rents are probably way too low. Anytime I hear long-term tenants, that's the problem. And that's what happened in this building, this 8-unit. We bought it and they said, there's long-term tenants. Well, the long-term tenants are paying $700 or $680, whatever that people that caused all the problems were paying. And now we got to tell them, hey, we got to raise your rent to $850. It was a huge problem. And that's what people need to understand. These long-term tenants qualify at $650, but they're not going to qualify at $800. And they're really not even qualify. It's got to be a 600 minimum credit score. It's no smoking. It's no dogs. We have all these rules in place. Now they already live there. We'll let them live there as long as they can make the future rents. That's the problem. It's the tenant base, and your tenant base can kill you. So when we buy these properties, they're in our backyard. So we live in this community. It's a great place to live. Problem is, rent for a 2-bedroom should be $1,000. They're paying $650. They shouldn't be living in Trenton, Michigan. Those rents are going to be more like E-course, Detroit area, right? It's going to be a rougher neighborhood, is where those rents are going to get you. So now all of a sudden we need to bring these rents up, and you're going to have a problem. So you need to know how to deal with them, how to bring these rents up, and how to avoid problems.
Does that pose different problems? Because again, for the audience that we're speaking to and that are interested in investing into multifamily in the States, there are obviously certain advantages that we find appealing. Ping and I look at the real estate in the US all the time, and there's some opportunities, at least on paper, it looks amazing. In Canada, for example, we look at certain problems that are challenging to overcome, such as tenant turnover. Eviction procedures, should tenants not be paying rent, are extremely long, extremely difficult. And so multifamily investing here is a very long game. Sometimes you almost have to wait for apartment turnover to happen organically, and addressing it can be challenging. When people are looking at apartment buildings over there, what is the biggest challenge addressing that tenant turnover, or for example, like what you said, the underperforming rents? Because obviously the previous owner didn't want to contend with it. Why?
Maintenance, because it's like a unsaid rule, right? They're going to put somebody in for $650. The rent should be $1,000. And then I'm exaggerating here to give everyone a better idea, right? I'm going to put you in for $650, but you better not call me. That's it. You want to call? You want to, right? Like, you want to keep calling me? I'm going to raise your rent. I'll raise your rent to $1,000, right? And it's like, I'll put you in. I won't run your credit and background. You shouldn't really be even living in this building. I'm going to keep my rents low, and you're not going to call me. I'm not going to replace anything.
So how do you contend with that then? How do you now turn that around?
That's what we tell them. We come in and we say, listen, first thing when we buy the building, we tell them, listen, the building is underperforming. That's why they sold it. And I asked them, has this old owner been fixing anything for you guys? No, never. They haven't fixed anything in years. Okay. We're going to fix things. First of all, I want to know water leak. We got to start with water leaks. We got to stop those. So give me a list of all your water leaks. We have to address building issues first, and then we're going to get into, major repairs first. And then we're going to get into, all my closet doors off track. I'm missing a closet door or whatever. That's second. We need to address the major problems first. They all understand that. We fix things when they tell us that they have a problem. But what comes along with that is the rents are going to go up. You're going to have to, that's why I tell them, that's why the old owner didn't fix anything, because there's no money here. The building does not make money, and the building needs to make money so you can continue to live in.
That's a conversation you have. That's a very candid conversation.
I do. I let them know that we need to look at how the building's performing. And I tell them the building is not doing well. That's why nobody fixed anything. In order for us to take care of this building, I want to make this a place where you can be proud of to bring your friends and your family. And in order to do that, the rents have to go up. Now, you don't have to stay. We'd love you to, but it's up to you. But that's just something we have,
Over there, the landlords have the right to have the very direct conversation with the tenant. Here, tenant doesn't want to leave after the lease term. Gets automatically converted into month to month. Landlords don't have say to that, right? We have rent control, and for non-payment rent, we just evict one of our tenants. It took us 13 months, right? So, yeah, so that's why, that's why when you were saying this, we're like, whoa, that kind of conversation would make me a little scared as a landlord, because we feel like the landlord holds all the cards.
All of our stuff, like when we buy a building, all those tenants are usually on month to month. We leave them on month to month. Because we want the ability to still get them out. We have our first building we bought. We have only out of 20 units, we have 2 tenants left that made it. Okay, everybody else washed out or washed themselves out or got asked to leave. We have 2 people left. They're great, but they're still on month to month. We still even haven't signed them to a year lease.
What does that process look like when you want to ask them to leave? Is it just a conversation? Do you go through, I guess, a sheriff?
So we do everything legally. It's a conversation, and we just let them know. If we want them to leave, we give them a 30-day notice, and that's what it is in Michigan. And that means they have 30 days to leave. If they don't leave, that means we have to start the eviction process. The eviction process could take 3 months. So now you're looking at like 4 months, right, to get them out. 8 years, knock on wood, we haven't had to go full term where the sheriff comes and throws them out. We haven't had to do that. We were close on one. That was the vandal, the one that was vandalizing and threatening us. It sucks to have to do that, to ask people to leave, but we do. But we mail them a letter. We don't go to the unit, knock on the door, and face-to-face confrontation. We don't do any of that. And then, like, once they're in the eviction system, they have a maintenance request. We'll fix it. We'll do whatever, but we don't talk to them. We don't tell them you need to pay, you need to do anything, you need to do it. We just say, you got to deal with that with the court. And then we just wish them the best. We like pray about it. And we just remind ourselves they're going to be out of our life. I'm never going to have to deal with that person again in the future. And they're going to have to be in their world for the rest of their lives.
If I wanted to budget it and I'm buying a property and we wanted to turn it over and we were going to raise the rent, but not a lot of the tenants were able to pay or they didn't want to comply, and I served them a 30-day notice. Now you said it can take 3 months on top of that. So there's a 4-month eviction process. What is that going to cost? So I would budget 4 months of non-payment of rent, plus I would budget the cost of eviction. So what would that look like, that cost of eviction?
Well, you really aren't going to know that until you take the building over. Who's going to pay? Everybody's going to, you're hoping everyone's going to pay. But eviction process would just depend on state, how much it is. Probably it depends on whatever they owe you. How far it gets, 4 months of rent, and then maybe $2,500 maybe for attorney fees. And then if it's a full rehab on the property, probably $10,000 if you're keeping cabinets.
Yes. And then the sheriff?
We haven't gone that far yet, but I really can't comment on that. But again, it would just depend on where you're at.
It's interesting because you said that whatever it is that they owe you, so you're actually counting that you will eventually see that money back.
We turn that over to a collection agency. So we'll see a portion of that back at some point. It could be 5 years. It could be who knows how long, but we do turn that over.
Most tenants here actually know their rights, that even after they receive the order, like a decision from the tribunal, they can still wait until sheriff to show up, and then they still have 48 hours to pack their stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So we've gone through that process multiple times, and we're pretty clear with exactly what we need to budget for every single tenancy turnover, repair, renovation, because in Ontario, we're not allowed to collect a deposit. Damage deposit is not allowed in Ontario. And that's why our business model shifted, I think back in 2018, we got into our very first multifamily. We shifted into the house flipping because we're like, okay, long run, this is the biggest risk, right? Tenancy turnover for Ontario landlord is the biggest risk. So we want to just focus on controlling the product and then start allocating the funds somewhere else.
Now I see why you got your answer. You're asking me that question because I'm like, I don't really understand, because it just is what it is. If something comes up, we just deal with it. We don't budget for it. I didn't know that. That's crazy.
Also, by the way, we have to go through the whole process. That's why.
By the way, I understand that some of the questions I might be asking might be very foreign in the sense because, again, there are a lot of Canadians who are seriously interested in buying in the US. And there's a lot of, I think, fundamentals that we won't know. Some of the things, like I have learned a lot. I know it varies state by state, but there's some things that we budget for that we assume you would need to budget for there. Like you mentioned rehab. To be honest, $10,000 in rehab actually is pretty good. I think for us, it would be a little bit more expensive, like maybe $15,000 to $20,000. But, depending on like the extent that you want to go. And also here, if the numbers are pretty staggering in terms of how much unpaid rent goes completely uncollected every year, because tenants can just leave and ditch, and the cost of recouping those funds is not worth what they owe you. So you would almost not pursue it. So that's why I'm asking some of these questions. But it sounds like over there's a little bit more compliance, and they're not as, willing to throw their weight around with their tenancies.
It depends on your state. Again, some states like California and New York, they have it takes a long time to get people out there. So it's just, I always recommend invest in landlord friendly states. I don't care what it is. If you don't pay, you shouldn't be able to stay. It's the way it is, right? Because I got a mortgage. If everyone decided not to pay, it would destroy us.
Biggest multifamily conference in Toronto. I think around 3,000 people showed up, right? Majority of the guest speakers are still American investors, right? Literally because we see a huge problem in Ontario. It's actually worse in California and New York. In Ontario, a lot of people are definitely interested in start allocating some capital into the states. Landlord friendly states to start their investment journey again. You started back in 2019, you were building the apartment buildings. You were able to actually get a lot of capital out and then continue to acquire for the next one. So burn method works extremely well when the market was super healthy. Right now, we're kind of going into a downturn. There's a lot of uncertainty in the next maybe a year or two or even longer. Yep. How would you adapt, or how would you recommend your investing strategy in the apartment building?
First of all, I want people to focus on one building. So if you want to buy a small apartment building, focus on one. I'm going to talk about three, we own 3 buildings and a duplex and all these different things we own. Don't focus on all that. You only need one building, if that's your goal. So only focus on that one, or otherwise you're going to overwhelm yourself. The other thing is, I like to see, when I analyze, a building, I like to see $100 per door per month. in this environment, right? Like you want it to cash flow, because if something goes wrong, you're in trouble. I also want to see that I could raise rents and get that number bigger. It'd be great to get $250 per door, but buy on actuals is huge. The other thing, lean into your W-2, cut as much expenses, your personal expenses as you can, and really supercharge your investing with your W-2. Don't focus on maybe quitting in a year or 2 years. Take all that W-2 money and buy as many properties as you can with it. That cash flow now. That's what I would suggest to people, in this market.
Right now, if we burn the property, you refi the property, you're refinancing at a much higher interest rate.
Yep.
Right. So does that actually still produce a good enough cash flow for the building and for you to actually feel comfortable investing into the next one?
It would depend, right? You'd have to look at the numbers on it if that makes sense for you. For us, we don't have those W-2s. So we haven't refinanced in a couple of years because it's going to kill our cash flow. It's just something you'd have to look at and try to figure out if it makes sense for you, because that's the problem, right? Your cash flow. But if you have that W-2 and now all of a sudden you're making a lot less money on that apartment, but you're able to go out and buy another one, to me, that's huge.
Yeah, you should still continue because right now it's not to buy.
Yeah, don't live off your cash flow. That cash flow should be going back into investing. And that's one of the problems we got into. We quit our W-2s. I hate to say we made a mistake because life is short, right? So I'm glad we both quit our W-2s and we did, but now we live off the cash flow off our rentals. So that, kind of stopped what we were doing. We were refinancing and moving forward and buying more properties. So that kind of, you kind of get a little stuck there.
Okay. So how important is it to keep the W-2s with respect to the qualification? Because I'm assuming that's what you're mainly leaning on it for, is the qualification on the next property, right?
We're not at all right now because they're commercial loans. So they're going to look at what the property does, how the property performs. That's what they're really going to want to look at.
Okay. So you're talking about it more for stability, right?
Yeah. So a first-time investor, somebody getting started, I'm talking about that for stability and be able to supercharge your investing. Lean into that W-2, use that W-2 money, to grow, to buy more buildings.
I still find that when a lot of people are looking at properties and they make them work, they end up convoluting let's just say the P&L of the building by miscalculating on sweat equity, right? When, for example, they don't throw in the property management costs, or there's things that are happening in the building, like even, for example, vandalism and having to do regular cleanup, anything like that, and it's done through sweat equity. And then they end up having two jobs. If they have their regular one and then they have their sweat equity on these apartment buildings. And it becomes challenging for those who are investing in properties that are far away. When it comes to searching out for properties that might be problematic, I think some of the considerations that Canadians don't know to look out for, I know it was mentioned to us by a few people, is potential crime indicators, for example. Like in Canada, I know that the numbers are very different here. For example, we don't look at that hardly at all as to whether or not there's any crime rates in the area. It's just not really a significant enough issue in most places. But I know that needs to be considered in different states. How significantly do you measure that? Is there anything that's like a metric that you go for that's like, this is definitely not something I'm going near, or this is like acceptable? How do you measure this?
I guess it depends on your level of risk and what you're comfortable with. If, some people invest in crime areas, right? Like I don't invest in Detroit. A lot of people do, right? The numbers on paper look fantastic, but the problem is none of my contractors will go in there and work because their tools will get stolen. I sold 2 houses in the city of Detroit as a realtor. The furnace and hot water tank got stolen out of both of them because they were vacant. So you get a lot of those problems. You really need to know Detroit exceptionally well, block by block, to invest there, and it's still risky. But there's people that make money there. So don't get me wrong. But for us, we like to think, since we self-manage, we would look at the building, we would look at the area. We always bought in our area, so we kind of had an idea. But sometimes we'd look at a property and my wife would be like, I'm not coming here at 8 o'clock. She's going to be there. We're going to be doing things. We're self-managed. We would just say, no, this is not a good investment. It's too close to Detroit, or it's too close to this or that. That's how we would do it. We don't want to be in situations that are going to be, put us or our tenants in a problem, because, I want you guys to live in our buildings, and are you going to live in a building that's in a bad crime area? Probably not. I'm not gonna, and I want me to be my tenant. That's what we look at.
You have moved to Florida, you and your wife. Are you guys still like managing the properties remotely, or you hire local?
We manage remotely. We hired a person to be that's and taking care of our properties, our boots on the ground. The problem is we would love to give it over to property management, but it would cost like $30,000 to $40,000. That's a major hit. That's the problem. Financial freedom's great. Once you start increasing, your expenses, you're right back to where you started. So that's just something we have to keep in mind. And that's what I like to point out to people. You know what I mean? It's this balancing act. Just because, we can say we're financially free, that doesn't mean we can buy a mansion, on the ocean and we're driving brand new Mercedes. That's not the case. So it's just, it's something you really have to think about. And starting out in this, we thought if we could cash flow $10,000 a month, that'd be it. We'd be great. Well, we're there. So it's just funny as you grow. You know what I mean? You just learn these different things, and that's where we're at. I did want to say one thing about Detroit too. Detroit has some awesome areas like downtown, midtown, things like that. They're phenomenal. They're so nice, but we're not buying properties there because they're ultra expensive there. Well, I'm talking about the neighborhoods of Detroit. There's some great neighborhoods, but you better know the neighborhood.
I have a friend who came from Detroit, right? And he's dating one of our other friends here. He came over, we're just chatting, and my brother's talking to him. And Canadians have a very stereotypical impression of Detroit. So when somebody says they're from Detroit, we think one thing only. Yeah. And he's talking to him. So like, how was it over there? Was it dangerous? Was it whatever? And if my friend has to stop him and says, listen, like, just want to clarify something. Whatever you think I grew up in the exact opposite of that. Yeah. And it was like not what you're thinking. There's different areas of Detroit, and there's like gated communities. There's some nice areas. But all we ever see or hear about it is very different. I mean, even like another gentleman for the U.S. who was running a property management in Detroit would joke a little bit about it, kind of joking, not joking, but would say, yeah, when we do property management over there, you go to LA, some people have concierge services in the property management. On Detroit, when they knock on the doors, they have to knock on the door, step to the side of the door, just in case, you
don't get shot.
So I understand that there's different things that happen. And I think to Canadians, it's very interesting because, the States has a lot of different vibes as you go through it. There's a lot of nuances to learn and handle. And I think some of these things can make or break you because a lot of people have these adages when it comes to multifamily. It says, if it looks good on paper and it makes money, you don't always have to see your investment. Like a realistic outlook on a lot of people who are more traditional in how they approach real estate investing. Being able to see and touch the product that you have invested in and take control over it gives you a lot of versatility. And I think a lot of people feel comfortable with that. It's easy to understand. It's not so theoretical and conceptual as in we just bought a property and everything works well. Because if you can't rely on other people, which sometimes you can rely on yourself. And sometimes people want to be able to take control. So how much control you want to take. So I think these are all like really great things to consider. And I think your approach is very relatable. You're taking care of properties you can manage. You're biting off what you can chew, and you have an understanding of what works for you. So with that, I think we should talk about your course a little bit because you have your apartment buying blueprints. So why don't you share with us a little bit about some of the core things you teach there?
The way that came to be though too is, I was golfing with Ryan Pineda. Again, back to Pineda, man, he's been a huge influence on me. And he's like, hey, if people watch your reels on Instagram, are they going to know what you know, everything you know? And are they going to be able to buy an apartment? And I'm like, no. And he's like, so listen, dude, build the course, help people out. That's what it's about. You need to teach people what you've done so that you can change people's lives. He was really the fuel to get me to build it. And that's exactly why I did. I know the feeling owning a few rental properties and going, well, I could never buy an apartment. And so many landlords have that feeling like, wow, I wouldn't know the first thing to do. And it's scary. Luckily, I had a mentor who owned apartments and we looked at him. So that's why it was a little less scary for us. But that's why I built this course to tell people like, hey, here's where you start. Here's all the way through the process. I teach people, if you want to self-manage, I have a ton of information on that. If you don't, I have a way to screen property management companies. I teach you everything through there. And I tell people, I'm like, look, if you take this course and you don't self-manage, you're going to know 99% more than people that just buy and have property management companies take over. Because I go through everything. So the cool thing is no one can bullshit me. We could have a call and we could talk about anything to do with construction or anything. And I'm going to know right away if you know what you're talking about, or if you're, if it was a property management company, if I'm getting screwed, I'll know pretty quickly. And that's what I try to do with people, is just educate them. Here's some problems we went through. Here's how we fixed them. Here's what you should look for. Here's the team you should have involved. That's what I teach. It's complete A to Z. I got like 55 videos in there. They're training videos, and I go through all of that. I have an underwriting tool in there that I provide to people. I spend $1,200 building that, and I give them that. They're in the course for life. It's really pretty cool. I'm telling you, I put this thing together. When you go through this, like you guys have forgot a lot of shit. It's not top of mind.
It's a little bit too intuitive to yourself. You don't realize that somebody else doesn't know these things.
You did it in the past and whatever. Yeah, you don't really. But when I sat down and I built this course, it took me 4 months, and then I got done and I looked at it. I was like, holy shit, this is really pretty good. I was really impressed with it because it's just it's retelling all that. Yeah, like you said, you don't realize that people don't know this stuff. I want to take the fear out of it. What if you could have bought this course in 2008 when the world was crashing? Like my buddy started buying properties in 2010, and his net worth he bought one single family rental, and his net worth $30 million today. So like, what if you could have been armed with this before the last crash? Well, guess what might be on the horizon? So that's why I tell people, man, educate yourself, and now's the time to do it, because you might really be able to take advantage.
Yeah, the bottom line is that you can really shorten the learning curve quite a bit. That's why we all invest in education. If we are trying to learn something or trying to get into any network, right, don't go through a long way to figure everything on your own, right? Because first of all, we're gonna all make some mistakes in between, and when we do that, that's a tuition, right? Might as well just put that towards the course, learn everything 1 to 2 months, so that you pick up a skill set that you can apply immediately, so that you're not wasting all the opportunity costs in between.
Yeah, mistakes are very expensive, and you don't have to learn them that way all the time.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like this has all been really great information. It sounds like your course has a lot to offer, especially knowing that you come from a journey in life that is of learning. People who have that, I feel, have a better understanding of what people need for learning. Because people might know a bunch of stuff, but being able to teach it and convey it to others is a whole other thing. And if you do not understand the challenges of learning, I feel like those teachers are not very easy to learn from. So I think you're coming from a really great place.
That's what I've tried to do, is just come from a point of honesty. I don't know everything. I'll be the first to say that. But here's what I did. Here's how I got there. And it's definitely repeatable. I'm not a guy that wants to reinvent the wheel. I'm not an engineer. I was a blue collar construction worker. I want to copy. And that's what I did in my career. I found my mentor. He told me, hey, take these steps. And that's what I did. I just copied what he told me. So I'm like, I'll just create a course and you can copy what I did. Financially free today, living in Florida. And it's like, the shit works. There's nothing special. You know what? There's something special about all of us. I don't want to say that, right? There is something special education wise. And like, I'm not an engineer doing this stuff. I just figured it out. I wasn't handy at all. I ran a crane. That doesn't equate to a home, right? That doesn't teach me how to, do carpentry work or do any of that. I wasn't handy at all. I figured it out, and then we hired people out to do it, and I was good at managing those contracts. Yeah. And that's what I teach people.
What inspires you to start doing content creation? Because you mentioned that you started doing that before you even launched the course. What made you want to do the video production? Because as we all know, it's a lot of work, a lot of time spent. It can get pretty expensive too.
Yeah, it can. I have 2 people on my team right now. So one full-time, one part-time. What happened was I became a realtor. I quit that property management job because it was just all consuming. And I had my realtor license. I'd had it for years. And that's another story. My wife told me, she's like, you're quitting the property management job and you're going to be a realtor. So I'm like, well, we're going to go to 0 income. And she's like, we'll figure it out. We had like 20 grand in the bank. That was it. I think we had 30 properties, but again, we were rehabbing everything out of cash flow. We were paying ourselves like 3 grand on those properties. At that point, we have 41 units now. It was scary, but my wife's like, we'll figure it out, man. We always do. So I quit, became a realtor. And then I'm like, well, how do I be the best realtor? I met with one of the guys at our brokerages, and he's like, listen, nobody's doing this. And this was like 2019. No one's making videos. And people, like 11 or 8% of realtors were making videos back, whatever it was. I don't remember. But he's like, you need to start making video, on Instagram and on Facebook and all these things. And I'm like, okay. So I started doing it for that. And then I always had this conflict within myself, like, well, I'm a real estate investor, but I got to make these videos as a realtor. And it was, it just sucked. And then when I quit being a realtor, I just went all in on investing video. And it just felt so much better. And that was it. And I just enjoyed putting them out there. I like people seeing react to it. You know what I mean? I like creating them. If you see our reels now today, I mean, I'm blown away. They're almost like movies. And I love that. I just love putting that out there and seeing people react to it.
That's amazing. And I do like that you pointed out what is effectively almost like an identity crisis when you start pushing what you need to out on social media, because we have an understanding of the content sometimes that we want to put out. But when you're somebody who wears multiple hats, a lot of entrepreneurs do wear multiple hats, but social media wants a little more focus sometimes. And that becomes a little challenging to do, especially because in business, there's a lot that goes into it. It's hard to consolidate it and simplify it and not create overly complicated content.
And you know, when I was a construction worker and all that, I couldn't really put anything out because I had that. I worked for the union and I didn't want people thinking I was taking advantage of time or anything like that. So it was always this struggle internally. And then when I quit all those things, it was like, oh my gosh, I can do whatever I want and say whatever I want on social media. And it was very freeing because I felt like I didn't have to answer to anybody about my social media.
People ask these questions of like, what is it that I should do in order to get to this stage? But I think sometimes the question people ought to be asking is, what shouldn't you be doing now? Because entrepreneurs is like, there's a natural inclination to do so many things, do a lot of things, because we're very good at going out there and just grabbing what we need to do them. But then it often gives us a lack of focus and a lack of freedom and liberty. I mean, I know people who even said that they're like, well, the realtor's license. Why? Because the realtor license just gave them some kind of exposure because there's RICO or some kind of governing licensing authority that can punish you should you say something on social media that's not right. And it's like, why keep your license? So there's things almost that when you want to go to the next level, maybe the angle is focus. And it's not what you should be doing next, but what you shouldn't be doing, and focus on just that one thing that makes sense. Is there anything else that you feel you wanted to add?
If you're interested in getting a hold of me or anything like that, you can follow me on Instagram at Grant Warrington. You can DM me. I answer questions to a certain degree. I answer everybody, but you know, obviously I can't write a book to everybody, but if you got a quick question, I'd love to help you. You know, a ton of information on there. You can click the link in my bio, and I got a newsletter that comes out once a week, and I'm really excited about the content in it. And I really wish that was there when I got started, because I've learned through pain and through paying money. It's pretty valuable. We've done the right things and had shit fall apart and cost us $27,000 for this one plumbing repair. And it's like, we did everything you're supposed to. And that's what I teach people. Like, hey, here's what happened to us, man. We did what we thought was right, but this is what happened. Here's how to fix it in the future and what to look for. So that's kind of stuff I like to share with people.
I'm sure people will enjoy this content. You've obviously had a lot of very valuable information to share. So I do appreciate having you on the show, and we'll be seeing you on the next one.
Appreciate it, man.